For our next chat entitled From Entrepreneurship to Investing, we have invited somebody that works well both sides of the table. As co-founder and CTO of Eventbrite, he needs little by way of introduction. Since it was founded in San Francisco more than a decade ago, the company has gone on to build the world's largest event technology platform, powering millions of events around the globe each year. But there's more to our guest. I said he's on both sides of the table, right? Because he's also a venture partner at Index Ventures, which is a venture capital and private equity based in London. It is a pleasure to welcome on stage Renaud Visage. Welcome. Thank you. And to conduct this chat, no better man than an angel investor from Singapore, also based in London, and a dear old friend of South Summit. Let's welcome Jeremy Yap. Welcome, Jeremy. Thank you. All yours, Jeremy.
Hey guys. Renaud.
Hey.
How's it going? Yeah, so, why don't we start at the beginning? Tell us about the early days of Eventbrite. How did that happen? I think everybody would love to know the struggle and the beginning.
So it happened a bit by accident. My co-founder, Kevin, had an idea of building an event management platform on top of PayPal. He was an early investor in PayPal. And he asked around, like he wanted a technical co-founder. He had met his girlfriend at the time 3 months before, and she had decided to join the adventure. And then my friend who was working for Kevin's previous company introduced us, and I really liked the project. I thought it was a novel idea for the event space that we thought was going to be big and getting bigger over time. So we just started working together. It was very one of these moments in life where you have to make a quick decision, decide whether you can trust your co-founders that you've never met before, and just embark on a journey together. And that's basically what we did. We bootstrapped the company for 2 years, tried to build the best self-service product to cater to the long tail of events, what we called, so the small, medium-sized events from the small meetup gathering at a tech conference or big events like this. We didn't think yet that we would be catering to much bigger music festivals, for example. When we started, it was not our target. And then over time, we started realizing that the value proposition that we were bringing, which was direct access to the ticket sales for the organizer. Event organizers are always strapped for cash. They need to pay for the room, for the caterer, for lighting, for everything. So they really appreciated that the money was directly deposited in their bank account through PayPal. And also the self-service aspect. All the other platforms at the time required an account manager. You had to set things up for you. Every time you wanted to make a change to your website, you had to call. With us, it was all on you to make all the changes that you wanted at any point in time. So these, I think, 2 big components of our platform in the early days were really appealing for quite a large crowd. And we started being very successful with events in San Francisco, where we started, tech events in particular, then tech events elsewhere, then other types of events pretty much across the US. And about 3 years, I think, after we launched, we realized that there were events in 150 countries. A lot of free events because we only supported PayPal, which had 26 currencies, I think, at the time. But really positive signs that there was the need for a platform like ours globally. And then we went on to raise money and hire a big team. And today we're more than 800 people with 13 offices around the globe, acquired a few companies along the way. So it's been a very fun experience.
This is super interesting. So, I mean, you're saying that you guys sort of didn't know each other before you started the company. There was sort of a courtship process, and I feel like this is probably a very common story for many people in the room. We want to start a business. Maybe you're a business guy, you need a technical founder, or you're a technical guy with you want to build and need someone to help you on the business side. Can you tell us more about what the courtship process was, and how did that all happen?
So it was like a dating period. We worked together. We didn't really have titles. We're just working on a project together. They would give me all the tech stuff to build. I would build it quickly. They would review. We would have that very quick feedback cycle that I think is important at the beginning. And just by doing, we established trust between each other. We also had very different backgrounds. So none of Kevin and Julia were technical, for example. So that relied entirely on me to make it happen. And over time, I think they realized that we had the right fit together, that we could do this at a much bigger scale.
How long did that take? Like when did you kind of know that? Like,
I think after 3 months we knew,
okay, wow.
and then they gave me a real contract. Like we formalized things, we set up the right relationships, the right split of the work, and that's I think important for co-founders to work well together. Is how do you divide the different areas of responsibilities you will have to deal with over time. It was pretty clear for us, but sometimes it's not so clear with founders who are all technical, for example, like who becomes CEO, who's the chief product officer, how do you make that work over the long term is not trivial.
And then when do you feel like it started to become obvious to you? Like, was it like on day one when you sort of like pitching the idea, you're saying, you know, you guys were doing one thing originally, you've expanded more and more. When do you feel like it started to, you're like, okay, this is really working? Was it like in the first year, in the second year, like how do you?
I think the third year, that's when we raised our Series A in 2009. We crossed, I think, 100 million in ticket sales that year, 3 years after we started. So we saw that, yes, definitely there was a need globally for this type of product. People were happy to tell their friends also. I think that was a big part of why Sequoia invested in us. They did a lot of due diligence with our organizers, and they had not only good things to say about us, but they still used the platform and they still told their friends. Like there were a lot of features we didn't have at the time. Our platform was quite not as robust as it is today. We went down several times with big events. So there were definitely a lot of challenges, but everybody, I think, who looked at the potential for the business and the space of the long tail of events, that the desire of people to fulfill their passion through events. I think that's probably a phenomena that's evolved with us. Like people quitting their jobs to start cooking classes or to start running races, for example. We have a lot of examples of this type of profiles that we enabled through that platform. And I think that's what was very interesting for us and also for the investors who put money behind it.
I mean, what was the scale of it? So you're saying that now like there's 20 times, 50, 100 times more events that they actually were like before Eventbrite, just because it was so much harder to do it back then. And is that what,
I don't know the scale. Like
it's
really hard to get aggregate numbers. The big events are well known, like the stadiums. They have rules, regulations around that. The meetups of the world, those are really hard to quantify. Like how many attendees are going?
Yeah, I mean,
some of them are selling tickets, others are free. So
yeah,
there's other ways to monetize events also that have, I think, attracted wannabe entrepreneurs to really take that seriously.
Yeah, because today I think probably everyone in this room has heard of Eventbrite. Everyone uses it, or at least bought a ticket off of it. Like, do you feel like it was as obvious like when you first started, and like that just something that everyone would use? Like, what did investors say? Was it really easy to raise money in the beginning? How was that process?
Well, it wasn't easy because we needed money in 2008 when the financial crisis hit, and everybody says we don't invest anymore. So we went out, we tried to raise money then, didn't work, so we went to family and friends, raised $1 million bridge round to enable us to still continue growing. We still grew quite nicely in 2008, so in 2009 when things got better, it was a lot easier to raise from, and we had a few term sheets we had to pick from. But no, it's never obvious. I mean, you see the growth of the company, you see the growth of the business, it's all positive signs, but we know, and even now, like, you guys are all using us, but it's not like there's no competition out there, so we try to remain as vigilant as we were before now to continue reinventing the business, enlarge our potential part of the event food chain, and still provide the level of service that we are known to be providing. I think that's something we did very well over the years, establish the trust with people. Like, your ticket is going to be in your attendee app, for example. You know that when you sell an event on Eventbrite, we'll sell the tickets for you, we will give you your money on time. All these small things that are actually pretty hard to do in the back end when you program all that.
How do you think about your sort of your competition or sort of like the developments in the space? Is it something you sort of watch very closely, or you sort of like, oh, I just do my own thing, they can do their own thing, and how do you sort of manage that?
I mean, we talk to probably, I don't know, 500 companies a year in our space. Everybody wants to talk to us, which is great. So we keep an eye on everyone. We establish relationships. That's what allowed us to do the few acquisitions that we've done over the years, to see how these businesses on their own managed to deliver on what they were promising. Like I think most of the acquisitions we had been in touch for a couple of years before we made the acquisition. So very vigilant, but more vigilant about what's coming next, I think, and how do we incorporate these into our products. We had the chance of growing at the same time as Facebook came online, as mobile phones starting to become more ubiquitous. And each time we were early adopters of these technologies, incorporating them into our products to create a different experience, both for attendees and for organizers. So that's more where the vigilance has to be for us, and thinking about all the future things we talk about these days, AI, VR, AR, all these things. Blockchain, I think, is a big one that could have a very big impact on the ticketing industry.
Yeah.
So how do we give ourselves the freedom to still innovate? I think that's probably a challenge for big organizations in general. Not that we're that big, but getting to that stage where it's becoming harder and harder to make decisions quickly.
Let's talk about that. So since it's the flavor of the month, like or quarter, like how do you feel like blockchain sort of could potentially sort of impact the business, and then how do you guys think about that?
Well, I think there's some big fundamental problems with the ticketing industry that our legislators have, like scalping, for example, or bots buying hundreds of tickets, reselling them on secondary markets. Like blockchain establishes ownership. Oh, we've had several cases where people have just been photocopying their PDF tickets and they sell them on eBay and people buy them. When they get to the gate, only one will be let through. Yeah. So these are fundamental problems that I think technologies like blockchain can help facilitate. Or creating a exchange platform so that any ticketing company can sell any type of inventory. That could be an interesting concept if you get enough of the big players to agree on standards and things like that.
Interesting. So you're in Europe, your co-founders are in US, and I understand that this is sort of a thing that started very, very early on as well. And so can you talk to us a bit more about like sort of managing that? You know, I guess managing a team where part of it is in one country, part of it is in Europe, and how do you sort of think about the difference between starting a company like somewhere here like Spain or starting a company in the US, and when you should start thinking about that and how that sort of works?
I mean, the US has many advantages, a big market. We were able to just focus on the US for 4 or 5 years, not be distracted with implementing different regulations for different European countries. So it's definitely an appealing market in itself. There's a lot of venture capital, there's a lot of talented people. Being in Europe, I think from the early days, helped us think about building a global platform. There's still a tendency for US businesses to not really care about the rest of the world. So I've tried to make sure the international agenda was always on the table.
Yep.
Because I mean, we've had many examples of other businesses that have reached critical mass in the US and have never been able to expand abroad.
Like StubHub.
There's plenty, for sure. So building a global, even Ticketmaster, our biggest competitor, they bought a lot of different companies and they have all different systems in all countries they're in.
Yeah.
Like we realized that having one platform, when a global promoter, for example, can have events in 10 different countries, like we're probably the only ones to offer that at this point. So it's become a clear differentiator and a value proposition that enlarges our potential market quite nicely.
Okay, interesting.
After that, building the team, I think there's talent everywhere, but if you want access to your US market, not being there is quite hard. I think in the early days, you can get traction easily. I invest in a few French startups, for example, and at some point, they've had to send their co-founders in the US somewhere, either New York, SF, Texas sometimes, to really take the business forward there. and to raise money also, because US investors are still, I think, preferentially attracted to founders who are next door. Maybe less in Europe actually than in the US.
Do you have any advice for people who are sort of, you've obviously built up a very, very large engineering team for Eventbrite. I mean, like, and is there any sort of advice you have for people in early days that they can do, like when, to look forward to the future, right? Like 10 people is very different from 500. Yeah.
I think the hardest thing when you scale the corporation is to maintain the same level of communication across. So we started in 2011 our international expansion in London with mostly a biz dev and marketing team. But it took us a while to get the mechanics of having all hands at the right time, being videotaped, being live streamed, being accessible to everyone on their own accord. Like maybe they didn't want to watch live, so we had to having all the rooms equipped with easy to set up video conferencing.
Yeah.
I mean, we've all fought with Skype for a long time, and then at some point we decided we need to invest. We need to have TVs where you just click and you can be connected to another room somewhere else. So these are the small things, I think, that create that global culture. That's actually the main challenge, I think, for all startups that expand elsewhere.
So you're investing now.
Yeah.
How did that happen? What's going on?
I started by mentoring at accelerators, incubators, got exposed to a lot of startups this way, really enjoyed the interactions with young or new entrepreneurs wanting to build a business. I started putting some of my money behind some of the startups that I met along the way, not very proactively and in an organized fashion, unlike you. I think that's your job, so you're doing it very well. More circumstances or meetings that I had that I enjoyed the interaction I had with the people and wanted to back in over the long term, both with advice but also with some capital. And then at the end of last year, we celebrated our 10 years at Eventbrite. I thought, what could be next for me? I really enjoy what I'm doing at Eventbrite. There's plenty of challenges. I'm more product builder, I think, in the end, than an entrepreneur in the true sense. And there's definitely a ton we have to build. So what else could I do? And I was, of course, venture capital came to mind. Is there a career for me in there? So I tried to find a venture partner role with a fund, and I found one with Index Ventures, had good relationship with some of the partners. Just to see what it's like on the other side. How do you look at companies? When you're an angel, it's mostly your decision, your money. You can meet someone for 10 minutes, write a check. That's totally okay. Nobody's going to complain about that. But when you're in a fund, there's much different economical forces that force you to look at companies very differently. And that's what I wanted to learn through that experience, to decide eventually when Eventbrite is successfully and not needing me anymore, if I want to join the venture capital world.
What's the most difficult thing about being an investor as opposed to sort of being an entrepreneur that you found?
I think it's like the feelings you get when you angel invest are probably not exactly the signal you need to use when you're part of a fund.
Yeah.
There's different requirements that you have as a fund in terms of how you multiply the money that was given to you by the LPs. So you have to look not just at the instinctive feeling from the entrepreneur, but also at the overall picture. Is the entrepreneur going to be able to scale that up to, or the entrepreneurs scale that up to $1 billion company? Because index and funds of 400, I think we have 2 funds of 400 million plus, one growth, one venture. They both have to have at least 3 or 4 unicorns in there to return the fund. So it's a lot of pressure for sure to find that unique specimen out there that has the right combination of team, of product, of market size, of competency to take this to $1 billion company. And these are the things I wanted to understand. What are the signals that you look at as a partner in a fund to decide whether to put 5-10 million into a company?
Do you feel like being the co-founder of a unicorn yourself, does that sort of help you sort of find the next billion-dollar company, or?
Both yes and no. I think there's very exciting challenges in all the companies that we meet, and the exciting part for me is more about I want to fix their product or help them fix their product so that they can have a better chance, but that's not necessarily the main ingredient when you have to make an investment decision. So it helps once you're invested, I think, to help guide the founders into scaling the right way, hiring the right people, organizing their teams properly, deciding which countries to go after. That for sure experience really matters. So that when you pick a partner, I think, to work with, to invest in your company, like, do your due diligence, understand how they've worked with other companies in the past, where have they been helpful. It's like you're building a team, a separate team, or an advisory team that has a stake in your company. But what I've found is that partners at different funds have different skills, and you kind of have to bring them together into your board in a way that you can cover all the different topics you're going to have to cover over time.
Good. Wow. Yeah. Well, time's up. So I mean, like, just one last question, which is, I guess, I think most people in the room they're like kind of living the dream. You're a successful entrepreneur. Now you move into being an investor. Sort of like, is it everything that is, seems like it is, or?
I mean, it's very exciting. It's really hard to juggle two jobs. Like the investor job is still very time-consuming. You meet a lot of companies. You spend a lot of time doing due diligence on specific deals. Building a company, on the other hand, is also very time-consuming. So I think at some point I will have to pick one or the other. But doing both is not a trivial pursuit, I would say. But it's quite exciting. I'm having fun. That's what counts.
Awesome. Thank you, Renaud.
Thank you.